Yo, JD here, and as you can see, we are back on F1 25. And as you can see by the title of today's video, hopefully these tips here will really transform your experience in F1 25. I know myself, playing F1 games for many years now, but when I first got into the F1 games, there were a lot of things that were very overwhelming, and there's a lot of things I wish I really prioritized a lot sooner, because I think that would have really accelerated my progression and really transformed my experience. So if you did like this video, make sure you do like it. Let me know you want to see more content such as this as well. And yeah, I think let's get into it. So tip number one, I think this is something you just have to do before doing anything else, and that is really setting up your game properly and setting it up the best for you, because there is no such thing as a perfect setup and you must do these exact settings, because a lot of that does depend on your input device, your wheel, your cockpit, the distance of the screen, all those other things. But I think there are some things that are kind of non-negotiable. Number one would be the correct camera. For me, if you want to be as competitive as you possibly can, then it really has to be the TV pod or the TV pod offset. I know I get quite a few comments, and I see a lot of comments on other people's videos as well, especially F1 eSport drivers, is, oh, why are you not using the cockpit cam? It'd be great if F1 eSports was forced to cockpit, then I think a lot of people would be using it a lot more. It's just that you can just see so much more around you, so when you're in a wheel-to-wheel situation, you can actually avoid contact. With track limits as well, there are a lot less blind corners when you're above the car. The rate of speed is significantly slowed down as well. It just makes it so much easier to be accurate, and again, in wheel-to-wheel combat. So if you really want to maximize your potential racing online, whether that's competitive racing, Grand Prix mode, then I would highly advise this. This also goes for the correct HUD placement. So I wouldn't be having the gear dial at the very top of the screen or in the corner or anything like that. I would be putting it no higher than the halo and just above your wheel, so it's in very close peripheral vision to what you're doing with the steering wheel. I think again that is very important. You want the screen to have as much real estate, aka space, as much as possible, so putting the delta in the far corners just so you can see the track as much as you possibly can. This also goes for the correct calibration for your pedals. I've actually done a video on this on the game settings, so if you like a bit of a baseline, I would definitely recommend checking that video out. But the correct calibration, so making sure you're not leaning on the pedals, because a lot of people tend to lean on the brakes, especially if I have a load cell pedal, tend to lean them on the straights, and then they're wondering why they're losing so much speed as well. This also goes for the throttle. Correct button layout, again, this is going to depend on your wheel or the input device you're actually using. But for me, the way I change ERS, I like to use this little toggle on the right thumbstick, so I flick between left and right. I know there's a lot of people who I've coached who use the rotary dials, and the problem with that, it makes it very hard to actually be accurate and to make the right choice. So I like to use the thumbstick. Me personally, just allows me to make a deliberate choice, not an accidental one, where I'm not going to be leaning on it by accident or anything like that at all, and there's less chances of a mistake. So something that's just easy to access, but it's hard to accidentally put an input into as well. Correct force feedback and rotation. Again, this is including my video, and again, this does depend on your wheel that you're using, but I would be trying to change as much settings within the wheel settings itself, so the Fanatec within the Fanatec software, maximize everything there. All my settings are actually down in the description if you'd like to try them out. And then in the game itself, again, I've done a video on this, but you want enough force feedback where you can really feel the weight of the car the more you're turning throughout the corners, but you don't want too little feedback where you're not relying on muscle memory or vibrations or anything like that at all. Also, the rotation, I would not recommend going above 360. I know that was the case on the previous game, because I think there's a bit of a glitch at the start of F1 24 or maybe even F1 23. But in this game, I would be starting with 360 if you're fairly new to the series, so whatever you're doing is going to be mirrored exactly in the game. And then I would be going down no lower than 280. I think 280 is a bit extreme. It's definitely possible if you're a very smooth driver and you're very comfortable with your inputs. But I think the sweet spot is probably going to be between 320, 360. I think I run on 340 right now, or 330. Again, it's in the description. This means it's going to turn a little bit more than what I'm doing, which gives the illusion of more downforce, more rotation, but it's just the game doing a little bit more, so you actually have to do less yourself. So definitely getting the right game settings before you start anything else. Can't stress how important it is, because if you don't get those optimized settings, it's going to affect all of your other inputs and everything else we're going to discuss here quite significantly. Number 2 is about learning no assists. And if you are a new player to the series, I would encourage you to start with assist first. So I wouldn't say full traction control is needed. I think medium traction, ABS, racing line for the entire track, or corners only, I think you can get away with as well. But I think if you really want to maximize your pace as much as possible, then ultimately you want to be getting to a stage where you are running no assists completely. And the reason for that is because you want to maximize the rotation from the brakes, because if you have anti-lock braking system, ABS on, it stops the wheels from locking. That's basically its entire role, and the consequence of that means that you can't actually rotate the car from when you're actually releasing the brakes. So when you have no ABS, you will find that the car is a lot more responsive. You actually get a lot more rotation from the car. So that's number 1. The next is the traction. If you have medium traction, or if you have the full traction control, again, all traction is trying to do is limit the wheel spin at all costs. And sometimes in order to do that, it actually has to drain and cut the power that the engine is giving you access to. So with no traction, full access to the power of the engine, but then you have to be smoother. So if you go from medium traction to no traction control, you might have to be about 20-30% smoother than no traction, but you're actually going to get a much better exit. So with no assists, it's obviously going to be harder to master, but if you were someone who is running like the medium traction ABS, you could be maximizing that to absolutely 100%. But if you're no assists and you're driving to about 70 to 80% of the potential with the no assists, you're probably going to be actually faster. So that's why I would really recommend you to be learning the no traction, the no ABS. With the racing line, this is actually the assist I would encourage you to keep on the longest, because a lot of people turn this off very early. It might even be the first assist. And the problem with that is that if you're not really comfortable with your reference points, your positioning of the car on the track, this can really affect your other inputs, such as the traction and the trail braking as well. So I would encourage you to turn off the traction first, then it would be the ABS, and then with the racing line, I would encourage you to put on corners only and don't rely on the line. So when you're going into corners, you're actually using like a 100-meter board. When the curb starts, something stationary on track, and then over time you become less and less reliant on that line. You want to imagine the line is just a solid color. Instead of using it for when it turns red, that's when you brake, green when you go into power, try and almost ignore that completely. Try and use actual reference points, use them, rely on them, become more comfortable in them, and then when you do turn off the line for good, you will be uncomfortable at first, but at least you've actually learnt those references, and then you can actually focus on actually executing the corner itself. Number 3, mirror your pedal and steering inputs, i.e. trail braking and the way you progress on the throttle. So something I think is quite useful for people, and also what I say in my coaching, whenever your wheel is straight and you have enough momentum, so those two things need to happen, you'll be able to maximize your inputs, whether that's on the brake, on the throttle. So if you've got enough speed and the wheel is straight, you can get straight to 100% of the brake. You're not going to be locking up or anything at all. Same when the wheel is straight on the exit of the corner. If you've got enough momentum and the wheel is straight again and you're not turning, then you'll be able to go on 100% of the throttle as well. So you really want to try and imagine that your wheel is interconnected with your pedals. It doesn't have to be exact, and the more you start to add momentum into your driving, the more aggressive you actually can be with the inputs itself. But again, the more the wheel is turned, the less input you'll be able to do. An example of this is that when you're on the brakes, if your brake pressure is too high as you're turning in, then you'll be locking up. And then with the throttle, if you're turning too much and then, well, the wheel's not even moving and you're trying to go on the throttle even more, then you're probably going to be losing the car. If you add more momentum into those equations, the more forgiving it actually is, But I think to start off with, you want to imagine whatever you're doing with the steering wheel. So the more you turn in, the more you release the brake. The more you start to unwind the wheel and exit the corner, the more you can actually go on the power itself. And watching the gameplay here, watching other competitive drivers, or watching my videos, really pay attention to that pedal telemetry and what the steering wheel is doing. You'll really start to see a relationship the more you actually focus on that. Number 4 is ERS management. You must learn to be comfortable multitasking if you really want to maximize your pace in races, because actually there's a big difference between the different ERS modes. So going from none to medium, you'll notice if you do that on the straight, when you're doing a Grand Prix mode, career mode, or if you're racing online, you're going to be losing a lot of pace. And then the medium to hot lap, again, you're going to be gaining quite a lot. And then hot lap to overtake, there is actually quite a big difference between them. So if you're a driver who just doesn't want to do that, just wants to run in medium and then use overtake whenever you have to, you're really not going to be maximizing your pace. And especially if you're trying to league race, you're going to leave yourself very vulnerable, and you're not really going to give yourself opportunities to maximize your pace as much as you possibly can. So you really need to change the ERS. And again, this goes back to the correct button layout, something where it's easy for you to change those modes, where you're not accidentally going to be doing it. Have a dedicated overtake button as well, like I do. And you really need to learn, depending on your race situation, is what you're going to be doing with that ERS mode. So an example of this again, if you're in a DRS with no opportunity to overtake the car ahead, there's no immediate threat from the car behind, then that's a good time to probably save the ERS, so go down to medium, or maybe go to none if you absolutely have to. And that leads me to my next point. Don't overuse none, and don't overuse overtake when it is absolutely not needed, because these are the opposite extremes. None practically gives you no power at all, and overtake gives you so much power, but it drains the battery so quick. Also the deployment as well, so you really need to keep an eye on that deployment bar. As you can see on the screen here, when that goes down, it resets every single lap. It changes, so the battery level and the deployment level are actually two separate things. So only when you absolutely need to use it, you use the deployment or the overtake button. So when the battery is absolutely critical, you can use none into the corners to regain that battery or the deployment itself. Or if you really need to overtake someone and defend from a driver behind, that's when you can actually use the overtake. So having that experience online, testing that online, that's something I'm going to be raising in a future point here. But ERS management, if you want to maximize your pace and become the complete driver, you have to be comfortable changing this on a very frequent basis. Tip number 5 is understanding and building setups for races online, or whether that's Grand Prix mode or career mode. TT is almost a separate game from career, the Grand Prix mode and online. TT setups, or just TT itself, will give you a good platform to learn the tracks and actually create a raw fast setup. So it will definitely be a good baseline. But in order to build the best setup for the best balance online, you must understand how the components work within the car itself. And again, I've done a video on this where I've actually explained what the different components actually do. But I think if you really want to get to your complete potential as a driver, the more you understand these different components, the effect it has on the car, because there are many things within the setup that actually achieve the same thing. One change can have more side effects than the other, can upset the balance a little bit more, because again, there is no such thing as a perfect setup, but there may be one that is going to give you the best balance itself. So when you test this in race situations where the tire wear and temperatures are actually factors, TT, you do not have this as a factor at all. So now when you actually test this online in Grand Prix mode, you can actually understand where you're lacking, where you need that more performance and stability. And then when you can actually understand and actually feel the differences in the changes, what you're making within the car setups, then you can actually not waste your time. You can actually make the correct tweaks. You can be more efficient at making those changes within the setup. And that is going to give you the best balance overall. But again, if you click the join button on my channel, I've actually uploaded all of my current online setups that are tweaked specifically for this. This is something that I'll be updating on a very regular, if not daily basis. And again, I've also done a video if you want to check that out, if you're interested in understanding setups more and more. Tip number 6 kind of leads on to my previous 2 points, is I really do recommend doing less of the TT, more of the Grand Prix mode on online races if you really wish to become the most well-rounded and competitive driver possible. You need to get experience on learning how to manage the car when the tires start to degrade, start to overheat. Gaining more of this experience will help you feel the car so much better, because again, when you're in TT, the conditions are perfect, the tire temperatures are locked in, there is no tire wear, you don't have to manage your ERS or anything at all. So again, it's good in learning a track and really maximizing your inputs as much as possible. Don't get me wrong, that is definitely a skill in itself. But when you play online, and especially if you're doing league racing, competitive racings, or even career mode, Grand Prix mode, the grip is constantly changing. The balance of the car is constantly changing as well. And doing more of this in the situation you actually want to get better at is going to give you a much better understanding, a much better feeling of your inputs, whether the setup changes you're doing are actually working properly. So again, for me, playing online Grand Prix mode, that was really my foundation, and that will actually teach you the correct muscle memory, because if you're just doing TT all the time, your muscle memory is going to be giving the absolute 100% all the time, which isn't a bad thing, for like a qualifying and a lap or two. But if you apply that to a race where the grip is constantly changing throughout the race, the balance is always changing, then you might be doing some 10 out of 10 laps, but then you're going to be incredibly inconsistent. And I think the art of actually managing a race is a completely different skill in itself. And again, this is going to teach you how to manage your ERS effectively. If all you do is TT, you may be a very fast driver, but you won't be able to maximize that pace effectively in a race situation without learning how to adapt your driving style based on the situation. So I would recommend online lobbies, as chaotic as they are. You can actually learn quite a lot of things from them. If you're doing league racing, I'd be practicing online, or I'd be doing quite a lot of Grand Prix mode. So going as far as when the tires start to drop off for races, that really teaches you to combat that understeer, really anticipate that understeer lap upon lap, learn to be smoother lap upon lap. Because again, if you're doing TT with the perfect conditions, that is the only muscle memory you actually know. So this is something I would really, really encourage you. And number 7 is quite an easy one, but I think just watching competitive drivers. So whether that's myself, Jana Wotmir, many of these sport drivers upload their footage now. You can learn an incredible amount by simply watching competitive players online, especially if they do the league races or whenever they do something non-TT, is what I would say. You can learn so much in terms of their inputs, how they're managing the races, the strategy, the ERS deployment, if they actually do show it on the screen itself. For me, I've been watching other drivers who aren't even as fast as me. You could just learn so many things that you perhaps didn't come to mind. So there's so many resources now. There kind of is almost no excuse not to understand what the correct inputs are, the correct muscle memory to become as fast as possible at the game. Really teaches you when to go for overtaking opportunities, when to use the battery, when to save the battery. You can learn an infinite amount simply just by really trying to engross yourself in putting yourself in the mindset of other drivers, watching their footage, learning how they adapt to races, tackle races, approach races as well. That's something that has really, really helped me. And the final point, and I think one of the most important, and this is something I say to pretty much everyone when I first have a coaching session with them, is understanding the fundamentals of the game. And what I mean by that exactly is actually understanding what the game rewards in terms of muscle memory. And this refers to my previous points as well. You can do this by watching competitive drivers, or a really good tool is actually the EA RaceNet tool, which is completely free. It logs your TT laps. And again, I wouldn't be basing everything on the TT, but just looking at the telemetry. So seeing what the drivers are doing, mirroring the inputs with the pedals and steering wheel, back to my previous point, you'll really be able to see that in detail, slow down, so you can really analyze that. Don't need to be copying it literally to the absolute millimeter, to the exact percentage, because no one does it exactly the same. But as long as you are doing that same approach within that same parameters, that is really, really going to be transforming your experience. Because for me, I think there is a huge misconception, and this is something I see in my coaching quite a lot. I always ask a lot of drivers, what do you need to change in your inputs to gain 1 or 2 seconds? And the answer I get most of the time is, well, I need to maximize my input. So I need to brake as late as I possibly can, turn as much as I possibly can, go on the throttle as early as I can. And they think they need to do more in order to be faster. But actually, in most cases, less is more. So actually learning to be efficient, so knowing when to be aggressive, but also knowing when to be patient, and just being as efficient as possible on the input. So you'll be surprised if you actually looked at telemetry of an esports driver, or maybe even someone like myself, versus a driver who's maybe 1 to 2 seconds a lap slower. You would actually find that with the telemetry, the faster driver is actually using the brakes for a longer duration throughout the lap, but the average pressure is much less because they're actually trail braking for longer. So when you actually start to carry more momentum through those corners, you need to control that momentum with the brakes. Whereas a lot of people who I coach, well, in order to get faster, I actually use the brakes less. So less braking, more the throttle, because throttle is what generates the speed. Actually, no, it's the trail braking that generates the speed. The braking input is probably the most important input on the game itself. So again, I think a lot of people really don't actually understand what the game rewards in terms of muscle memory and what they actually need to be focusing on to get faster. So the idea of momentum is absolutely huge. This is something I really talk about in my coaching sessions. I think it's probably one of the biggest driving forces. And again, that is generated by the way you trail brake. So the more you turn in, the more you release the brake. On this game, pretty much as soon as you start to turn in, you want to be dropping that brake pressure very, very quickly, because you're actually going to be using the downforce to slow the car down, and you're going to keep that minimum speed and rotation. But I will be saving that for a completely dedicated video, because I think trail braking is going to be such a huge thing. But again, I really would encourage you for now to mirror the inputs with the pedal and the steering. This is just going to transform your game absolutely straight away, because with a loss of momentum, so if you're trying to brake as late as you possibly can to maximize every single input as much as possible, again, an example of this is you brake as late as you possibly can, because now you've broken too late, you're having to slow the car down even more. So you have to stay on the brakes for a higher pressure for longer, then you release the brakes quicker, and now because you've actually slowed the car down too much, you're having to turn so much more to get into the corner. And now because you're turning a lot and the car's slower, the minimum speed is lower, and you try and get the traction, there's going to be so much more wheel spin, so much more instability. So again, sometimes less is more. So really understanding these fundamentals. Again, I'll be making a video completely on this as well, but really mirroring your inputs as much as possible is going to take you a long, long way. But these are my tips for today. Just some quick tips as well. Again, I will be making dedicated videos on quite a number of these points, but I really hope they have helped you out. Click the join button to get access to my setups, discount one-to-one coaching. Also, if you want to ask me any questions, send me any footage within my Discord. If you become a member, you'll get to speak to me directly as well. But if there are any points here that you think are main priority and you want me to make a video on ASAP, please let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope this has helped you, and I will catch you very, very soon. Peace.